Welcome to this episode of Toronto Blue Jays Update. Before we dive into today's breaking news, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and share your opinion in the comments below. Your engagement keeps this content coming. The Mets just made a late-night Tuesday trade for center fielder Luis Robert Jr. from the White Sox. They've been long rumored to be involved with him and finally pulled the trigger, trading pitching prospect Truman Pauley and Luis Angel Acuña. This is a really interesting move that has implications across the entire league, including for teams like the Blue Jays, who are still looking at the market. There's obviously some gamble here with Robert Jr., but if you have the money, and Steve Cohen clearly has the money, this is a worthwhile gamble in a market where it's extremely difficult to find a center fielder. On the downside, you're dealing with lots of strikeouts and a bit of an injury history these last few years, but even at his worst last year, he really hit lefty pitching. Suddenly, with Bichette and Robert Jr., the Mets have two right-handed bats to balance out their lineup, which is crucial. Even at his worst, Robert Jr. is an above-average center fielder, which is a very hard thing to find in today's game. He'll hit some homers and steal bases at a pretty good rate, so there's definitely upside to this player. The real upside, though, 3 years ago, he was one of the better all-around players in baseball. Is that version completely gone? He should be in his prime at 27, 28 years of age, with a chance to perform in a lineup where he'll probably be asked to hit lower in the order and not be the carrying force like he was with a bad White Sox team these last few years. The Mets don't have to rush Carson Bench now. They could find other ways to structure their outfield. Bench can play left field while Robert handles center, but there's less necessity to force that situation. The Mets could even try to find another outfielder in this market if they wanted. This is a run prevention player, a good center fielder who fits what David Stearns has been trying to build all offseason. Acuña was part of the sell-off a couple years back when the Mets were disappointing and Max Scherzer went to Texas. He came back as a trade piece then. There wasn't going to be much room for him at the end, with Bichette playing third and Marcus Semien acquired at second base. By the way, Semien is another right-handed hitter for the Mets. Brett Beatty will probably move between second, third, and maybe left field or first base. Jet Williams is coming and is probably more comfortable on the dirt than in the outfield, so he's a second base possibility. Acuña was duplicated on this team. He did bring speed, which was valuable, but they get some of that back with Robert Jr. Without knowing for sure, since this trade just went down, this probably dims the Mets' interest in Cody Bellinger. I would never say never, because he could be part of a left field, first base group for the Mets if they wanted to go there, but they've now applied a lot of money among Semien, Bichette, and Robert to the positional group. They clearly would like to add a starting pitcher and a couple of bullpen arms probably before this is all done, and they begin the regular season. We're 2+ weeks away from spring training. There was speculation a few days ago before any of this went down that the Mets would make 3, 4, 5 moves when people were complaining they weren't doing anything. Bichette and Robert are part of it. Expect them to add a starting pitcher. Expect them to do something about the bullpen, and who knows if they're stopping there. They've clearly shown they can use Steve Cohen's money as a big advantage, whether it's snatching Bichette away from the Phillies at the 11th hour or being the team that finally pulled the trigger with the White Sox, who have been thinking about and trying to move Robert Jr. for a while. They found their match. The Mets are taking on his contract. He makes $20 million in 2026 with a $20 million in 2027 option and a $2 million buyout. If you have the money and you have the need in center field and you need a right-hander while thinking defense and athleticism, this is a really good gamble. The question now becomes, what does this mean for the rest of the market? Teams like the Blue Jays, who are still looking at outfield options, have to be paying attention. Does this mean Bellinger's price comes down? Does this create more urgency for other teams? The White Sox finally moved Robert after holding on to him through multiple trade deadlines. They got a pitching prospect in Truman Pauley, who has some upside, and Acuña, who brings speed and versatility. For a rebuilding team, getting younger pieces makes sense, even if the return doesn't seem overwhelming on the surface. For the Mets, this is about maximizing their competitive window right now. They've added veteran pieces, brought in right-handed power, addressed center field defense, and they're not done yet. The starting pitching market is still active, and they have the resources to make another significant addition. The bullpen needs help, and Cohen has shown he's willing to spend to address weaknesses. This move also shows how quickly things can change in the offseason. One day there's speculation, the next day a deal is done. Teams that have been patient might need to start acting more aggressively. The Blue Jays have been connected to various outfielders and starting pitchers all winter. Seeing the Mets move decisively should create some urgency in the front office. Robert Jr. gets a fresh start with a contending team. He goes from a rebuilding situation in Chicago, where he was expected to carry the load, to New York, where he can be a complementary piece in a loaded lineup. Sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what a player needs to rediscover their best form. If the Mets can tap into even 75% of what Robert was 3 years ago, this becomes an absolute steal. The health concerns are real. He's missed significant time the last couple seasons. But the Mets have depth now and don't need to run him into the ground. They can manage his workload and keep him fresh for when it matters most in September and October. This is the kind of calculated risk that contending teams need to take. Not every move works out perfectly, but you need to be aggressive when you have a window. The Mets clearly believe their window is now, and they're going all in. Whether it works remains to be seen, but you can't fault the approach. That's all for today's update. Don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think this means for the Blue Jays? Should they be more aggressive? Let me know below.